Welcome to The Explainer. Our goal here is simple. We take complex events, dig into the source material, and give you a really clear, structured way to understand what's going on. Okay, let's just start with this quote because it's a huge statement. We're talking about a policy from the 1800s being brought back to life. This isn't just talk. It's a signal of a massive shift in how the U.S. sees its role in its own backyard. And it's the key to understanding everything that happened next.
And then bam! It happens. On January 3rd, 2026, U.S. Special Forces are on the ground in Caracas, and they capture the president, Nicolás Maduro. This sent absolute shockwaves around the world. I mean, this is the biggest U.S. military move in Latin America in more than 30 years.
All right, so to really wrap our heads around this whole thing, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. We'll look at the strike on Caracas itself, how it went down. Then we'll get into Washington's side of the story, their case for war. We'll trace back how we even got here, from partners to enemies. Then we'll see how the world split right down the middle on this. And finally, we'll talk about the big question, what now? The unwritten future.
All right, first up, the strike on Caracas. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this operation actually unfolded.
So this operation was incredibly precise, almost like something out of a movie. It kicked off with precision strikes, hitting key military spots, like an airbase and a fort. And while that was happening, you had U.S. Delta Force raiding the presidential residence. They captured President Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores, and they were immediately taken to the U.S. to face trial. It's got major echoes of the 1989 capture of Manuel Noriega in Panama, for sure.
So that's the how. But now let's talk about the why. How on earth did the U.S. justify an action this big, this controversial, on the world stage?
Well, Washington laid out a 3-pronged argument. First, they painted Maduro as the head of a narco-terrorist state, basically saying he was running a giant drug operation called the Cartel of the Suns. Second, they pointed to the complete breakdown of democracy there, zeroing in on that 2024 election, which was widely seen as a total sham. And third, they designated these powerful Venezuelan gangs as foreign terrorist organizations. That was a key move because it let them frame the whole situation as a direct threat to U.S. security.
But you know, something this huge doesn't just happen out of the blue. This is really the explosive finale to a long, slow-burning story of a relationship that just completely fell apart over the last couple of decades. Yeah, this timeline really tells the whole story. You go back to the 1920s and it was a golden era. The U.S. and Venezuela were reliable oil partners. But then, fast forward to 1999, Hugo Chavez comes to power and everything flips. It becomes about an anti-imperialist struggle. Then you get this failed coup in 2002. Chavez blamed Washington for it, and that mistrust just got deeper and deeper. It all culminates in that 2024 election, which Maduro claims to win after blocking his main opponent, setting the stage for what happened in 2026.
So, no surprise, right? The moment this happened, the international community just fractured. It sparked this huge, really heated debate about whether what the U.S. did was even legal.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Was this operation legal under international law? This is what has diplomats and legal experts completely at odds. So, the whole legal fight really boils down to 2 totally different ways of seeing it. On one side, you have critics pointing to the UN Charter, which basically says you can't just use force against another country's sovereignty, period. They're calling it a crime of aggression. But on the other side, the US is making a self-defense claim, saying they had to act against a narco-terrorist threat. The problem for them is that a lot of legal scholars are pushing back, saying, wait a minute, where was the imminent military threat from Venezuela? That's usually the bar you have to clear for self-defense.
And this quote from Jeffrey Robertson, a former UN War Crimes Court president, really sums up how a lot of the international legal world sees this. He says flat out, America is in breach of the United Nations Charter. It has committed the crime of aggression. That's not just a disagreement on policy, that's calling it the supreme international crime.
This chart really shows you how the world split into camps, like instantly. In one corner, you've got Russia and China, plus big regional players like Brazil and Mexico, all condemning the action. In the other corner, you have countries like Israel and several South American neighbors coming out in support. And then there's this middle group, the EU, the UK, Canada, who are basically saying, we don't like Maduro, but we're really worried about how this all went down and we need to respect international law.
Okay, so Maduro is gone. The world is divided. And that leaves us with this massive, looming question. What happens now? The future for Venezuela, and honestly for the whole region, is just a huge blank page.
I mean, think about it. What actually happens when a nation's leader just
vanishes overnight. That's the core of the incredible uncertainty that Venezuela and all its neighbors are now grappling with.
And inside Venezuela itself, it's chaotic. There's a huge power vacuum. Nobody's really sure who's in charge. There's a real danger of an even bigger refugee crisis. And remember, over 7 million people have already left. And the biggest question mark is the military. Are they going to support a peaceful transition, or is the whole country going to splinter into a civil war? Meanwhile, countries like Colombia and Brazil are already moving troops to their borders, just bracing for the impact.
And this brings us right back to that quote from the beginning, the Don Roe Doctrine. This isn't just a clever name. It seems to be a real pivot in American foreign policy. It's signaling that the U.S. is going to focus its power right here in the Western Hemisphere and maybe pull back from being the world's police officer elsewhere.
And that's where the global stakes get really high. A lot of experts are worried that if the U.S. is only focused on its own backyard, it might actually be giving a green light to Russia in Europe and China and Asia to expand their own influence. We could be looking at a return to a world carved up into regional spheres of influence.
And, history has some pretty tough lessons here. As this quote from Laurel Rapp at Chatham House points out, the U.S. record on regime change is mixed at best. Just think about Iraq or Afghanistan. There's a very real danger that the U.S. could get bogged down in the incredibly messy business of trying to run another country, repeating the same mistakes all over again. So, this leaves us with one final big thought to chew on. One nation's resolve has completely reshaped another. But as we look at this new, uncertain reality, you have to ask, what is the true price of this new order?